So, okay, bit of a change. It's going, we spent the next 4.5 days and I hardly saw any coffee, like so little coffee. What I saw was washing stations that were closed and they just, no cascara on the side of the road. I didn't see any trucks moving, anything. It was just quiet, dead, looking there. And all you can see is eucalyptus. Everything is planted in eucalyptus. And where there is not eucalyptus, there was a fairly barren land where in the past there'd been towering trees. And, you know, talking to people down there, they just basically said, it's just not worth it to plant coffee.
This episode is proudly brought to you by Mapper Forward's workshop, It's Time to Become a Coffee Consultant. Learn how to diversify your revenue streams and create freedom from your day job while saying goodbye to that alarm clock forever by becoming a consultant within the coffee industry or directly to consumers who have shifted towards home brewing and home roasting. Protect your income from challenging times in the coffee value chain by taking this course today. Go to mapperforward.coffee/workshops or click the link in the show notes for details. Welcome to Daily Coffee Pro by Map It Forward, friends. I'm your host, Lee Safar, and this is episode 1 of a brand new 5-part series with Matt Toogood, one of the co-founders of Raw Coffee here in Dubai. Matt, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much, Lee. It's been a long time coming.
It has been a long time coming. Matt, we have a very special reason for having you on the podcast. And for those who are watching and who think, what's the go with the different background? Matt and I are actually in the same room, which you'd never know it because our backgrounds are different. But, and I know that my background looks fake. It's not fake. I'm sitting in Raw and we're at kind of two ends of a different table. So behind me here is all of the Raw retail section, and behind Matt is the beautiful, well-known wall that everybody knows is here at Raw, here in Dubai. Now, Matt, why don't you tell everybody what you do at Raw, and then we'll have a conversation and we'll let everybody know why we're having this discussion.
So I'm the Grand Poobah at Raw, and I have my boss. Kim is the original founder of Raw. My position is CEO, which basically means that I handle a lot of the sales and financial side of the business, and Kim handles a lot more of the operational side of the business.
Okay. So, and for those who don't know about Raw, Raw is the OG specialty coffee shop here in the Middle East. It is 17 years old. It is kind of the grandmother cafe of all of the cafes across the Middle East in specialty coffee. And it is kind of the place where everybody who went on to do really great things usually had their first espresso experience here at Raw. So it is a cafe to be held in esteem amongst cafes all over the world. Now, I got to know Matt and Kim. Kim, everyone knows, has been on the podcast before a couple of times. This is Matt's first time, but it was actually sitting at a table over there that Matt sat me down and he said, very unassumingly, I had no idea that this was going to happen. He said, so you should kind of like look into what's going on in Ethiopia with eucalyptus. And I'm like, oh, thinking nothing of it. And Matt has this kind of way of just like throwing a bomb in your direction and sideswiping you with it. And and it turns out to be a huge deal. So word, mate, thanks.
Yeah, it wasn't meant to be a hand grenade.
No, but so for anyone who has watched the series or listened to the series with Heliana Georgalis from Moplaco, Matt is the person who we referred to in the series as the person who said, you need to go and have a look at what's going on in Ethiopia with eucalyptus. And the reason Matt could say that to me was because Matt had just returned from Ethiopia at the time. So, Matt, in this series, we're going to be talking about, in general, the coffee crisis from the perspective of a business like Raw that's doing very, very well. Okay. And the reason that we're going to position that way is because even for businesses, just like when Noah came on the podcast and said, look, we're a business that's doing well and we're finding it challenging. Like, these are not easy waters to navigate. Then the amount of people that contacted me and said, thank you for actually bringing somebody on the podcast that could help us understand that we're not alone. And it is true leadership, as far as I'm concerned, when business owners can come on the podcast and say, so listen, we're seasoned professionals at this, and this is a very unique time. We need to have a chat about it. And so that's why, first of all, thank you before we have this conversation for the conversation that we're about to have. You and I have amazing conversations as far as I'm concerned. Every time we sit down and have a coffee that ends up going for 3 or 4 hours, it's always, I learn, I explore, I understand more. And now I get to be able to do that here with everybody being able to listen. So in this episode, we're going to talk about the eucalyptus situation and the chat situation in Ethiopia from the perspective of the roaster. So please tell us from your perspective, as somebody who's just come back from Ethiopia, for all of those people who contacted me and said, it can't be possible that that's what's happening. What are your thoughts about why people are thinking that, and tell us what's actually happening?
Okay, so let me just give a little bit of a preface, just for those people who haven't had the luxury that I have of going to Origin fairly regularly. I've been going to Origin now for 13 years, and I think 12, 13 years ago, the first time I went to Ethiopia. I'm originally from New Zealand. I spent the last 15 years in Dubai, in the Middle East, and I've got a mother who's 65 who lives in Auckland, who is always going, what are you doing? I feel there's amazing photos of you off. Where are you this year? What are you doing? And she came up for Christmas last year, and it just had happened that the week before, Eliana had come through Dubai and we got together, and she'd been saying the same thing to me and Kim for probably 4 or 5 years, and I probably wasn't listening properly. And she said, look, you just need to come down. And I said, fine, I'll bring my mother down next week. It kind of as a joke. And she went, no, do bring her down. I said, okay, well, what are we going to do? And she said, well, let's just do the classic coffee trail, Sadamo to Sadama, dropping in at Yugashefa. So I hope that these are names that people listening actually recognize as kind of the main thing that we know about Ethiopian coffee. These areas are sacred to us. So we went down to, we ended up flying, not driving, which we normally do, from Addis Ababa to Awassa. And the reason that we couldn't drive was given to me as it wasn't safe. Now, it's a 6-hour drive. It's usually not really a problem, but it wasn't safe. So, okay, we catch an hour's flight to Awassa, and we jump in the ubiquitous Toyota Land Cruiser, white Toyota Land Cruisers, which we see everywhere in Coffee Origin, and we start driving. And Eliana is explaining to my mother, that this is, there's different regions and where we're going. And I was just sort of sitting there watching. And we were driving and driving and driving and driving. And I'm sort of going, look, it's been a few years since I've been here, but where's the coffee? And the coffee just wasn't there. And it was literally somewhere between hour 2 and hour 3 of driving was the first coffee tree we saw. And I'm sort of going, oh, okay, I must have this wrong. We must have landed somewhere and we're driving on a different road. I'm saying, but hold it. I recognize this. We're coming into Eucalyptus now. And again, still not hardly any coffee. And the other thing I noticed is that we were the only other white Land Cruiser. And at this time of the year, this is towards the end of December, middle of harvest. Normally in that region, you see probably 20 or 30, if not 50 other coffee buying groups driving around and looking at coffee. So we pull in and I said to Eliana, but did we come a different way? Did we do something? And she said, no, that's the way, but the coffee's gone. And it was kind of a little bit, I wouldn't say horrific, but I was just confused. I just couldn't understand what was going on. I just thought, okay, there's something strange happening. The next day, we spent some time at a processing station. We saw some cherry coming in, and I said, okay, so fairly light day. Yep, that's it. We're within a week of finishing the season. I said, I beg your pardon? What do you mean we're in a week of finishing the season? I said, it's the 18th of December. He said, that's it. The whole season in Yugashefe was 2 weeks. And I'm looking at the tables. The tables aren't full of cherry. I'm looking at what was coming in, and it was a couple of ute loads of cherry coming in for processing. Normally you'd have 5 or 6 trucks backed up at the gate at that, early in the morning or late in the evening coming in for processing early in the morning. And there was just no activity. So we went for a walk up behind the station, and it started to make more and more sense. We're walking in very undense bush. And I'm used to in Ethiopia, when you're walking amongst coffee trees and things, you're used to walking amongst dense bush. A lot of the big trees, you could see the stumps on the ground, but you couldn't see any big trees. There wasn't really a canopy. And we came around a corner and the entire section had been turned into eucalyptus. And this is right beside one of the most significant processing centers in Yugashefe. And normally when I've been there, that has been surrounded by coffee trees. So, okay, bit of a change. We spent the next 4.5 days and I hardly saw any coffee, like so little coffee. What I saw was washing stations that were closed. And they just, no cascara on the side of the road. I didn't see any trucks moving, anything. It was just quiet, dead, looking there. And all you can see is eucalyptus. Everything is planted in eucalyptus. And where there is not eucalyptus, there was a fairly barren land where in the past there'd been towering trees. And, talking to people down there, they just basically said, it's just not worth it to plant coffee. It takes a huge amount of time. We don't get the return. With eucalyptus, we can plant it. We can leave it there. In a year, 2 years' time, we harvest it. We've got a guaranteed income because there are trucks passing every day down the main road that will buy it from us and move it. And I said, what about the coffee? We've got coffee. The Ethiopians drink a lot of coffee. And so when you normally drive into a small town in Ethiopia, what you'll see is a lot of coffee stands. You'll see usually a market area, which is most of the time bustling and energetic. These market stall areas were pretty much devoid of most food. You may have a few people selling a little bit of food there. You would have about 50 young men who were cleaning shoes. For those people who haven't been to Africa, how your shoes look, how smart your shoes are is a very important part in Africa. So a lot of the guys will clean shoes, but that was all that was happening. I wasn't seeing people bringing in produce into market. And as we got further and further during the day, you started to notice the reason why, which is the fact that everybody was chewing cut or tart or however you want to pronounce it. And this reminded me very much of Yemen. When we could go to Yemen, we started working with the Yemeni coffee farmers about 11, 12 years ago. And in Yemen, people chew chat all day. It keeps them in a nice, happy mood. They're very talkative. They'll sit around. In Yemen, they don't even drink coffee. They drink cascara. But in Ethiopia, they sit around all day chewing khat and drinking coffee. And it was like, well, but what about the coffee? Well, it's too hard. When we were in Sadamo, I was talking to one of the station managers, and I said to him, how's your honey production? And he said, we don't have any bees left. I said, what do you mean you don't have any bees left? We said, all the hives, and in Ethiopia, they build hives into trees. They're basically logs. They drill holes in them. And those were the pollinators and everything. He said, no, they're all gone. There's no bees here at all. There's nothing here. And I think I probably took 2 or 3 hours of video showing nothing but eucalyptus plantations because there wasn't any coffee to film. We went to Sadama, and it just about broke my heart because we were in an area that I'd been to before that was, I know, had probably provided some at least top 10 world of coffees over the years, if not winning coffees over the years. And these hills were just stripped bare, and they were waiting to be planted in eucalyptus. Some of the best coffee growing hills in Ethiopia are now stripped bare. And for those people who haven't walked amongst eucalyptus, it's a really weird sensation because there's very little bird life. There's not a lot going on. You don't find insects. Like, it's really weird. Like I'm used to walking through coffee fields and swiping off, cobwebs and, getting bugs all over you and stuff. And eucalyptus it's like it just kills everything else around it, and that's all that grows. And the ground is super, super, super dry. Like, you can stick your finger all the way into the ground and it's just dry, dead. It was horrific. And, I'm talking to people as they're bringing small amounts of cherry into the watching stations and things. And one young Ethiopian gentleman was telling me that he was given a plot of land. So he's one of 8 children. And so his father cut the land into 8 pieces. And his piece, as soon as he got it, he sold it and bought a motorbike. And he used that motorbike to be a taxi. And I said, you mean you use your motorbike to meet young ladies? And he just laughed and said, yeah. Now, you imagine it, aviator sunglasses, and he's got his motorbike and everything like that. I said, so how's the whole thing, how's that going? You took your entire life savings and you bought a motorbike. And he said, yeah, but everyone else did it. So it's basically we give rides to our friends for free. And I said, okay, so how's that working out for you? And he goes, yeah, I'm not so sure I've done the right thing. And I was privileged to actually spend some time I'm not going to tell someone how to farm coffee, but I can tell a young man, a little bit about life and, what's important. And I asked him the question. I said, so what do you like to eat? And he said, I like to eat, onions and tomatoes and everything. So that's good because you can grow those. And he looked at me like I was from out of space. And I said, you just grow them. And he goes, how do you do that? I said, you don't know how to grow tomatoes? He said, no. Did your parents grow tomatoes? Yeah. But that was ages ago. We don't do that now. We go to the market and buy them. And I said to him, oh, hold on, wait a sec. So you've got this piece you had this piece of land and, you could have grown food for yourself, but instead you plant eucalyptus and cut, and then you sell that to buy food. And I said to him, why don't you just grow tomatoes and then go to the market and sell those? You'd be better off. And he just sort of laughed at me, and then he looked at me, and it's interesting because I've had some conversations about what he's doing. He's sold his motorbike and he's bought his land back, which was kind of lucky. And I really hope that he will be able to do it. But these young people, that's what they're doing. And it's unfortunate. It's not just Ethiopia. I've seen it in Mexico. I've seen it in Rwanda. I've seen it all over the place that they're doing it. So, what we need as a roaster is to be able to provide our customers with a consistent quality. Now, how do I forward look at that when I know that my producers are struggling to buy cherry? They don't know what they're going to get year on year. And so I'm thinking, wow, 25% of the coffee that we use is Ethiopia. What do I do now? Because I can see that there's not going to be coffee available, or the coffee that is either going to be available is either going to be poor quality, or it's going to be so expensive that we won't be able to afford it. It's a pretty scary situation.
Tell me something. For the people who are in disbelief about this, for the people who believe that it's not possible that this is happening and coffee producers really owe us to grow coffee, that's where the disbelief is coming from. The idea that coffee producers have to grow coffee for us. Please help people understand that coffee producers don't have any obligation to provide those of us in the West who want to drink coffee. They have no obligation to provide us with coffee if we're not prepared to pay them for the crop.
Coffee is a very, very difficult product to grow. It is not a product that, it's not a plant and just forget it. If you want a high quality coffee, you are managing your trees. If you're in an area like Ethiopia, typically they're not planted trees per se. Like the farms are naturally seeded to start off with, and they then have to be managed. Now, I'm extremely careful because I think that there's a lot of people out there who think that they should help coffee producers and coffee farmers with their farming practices. And to anybody who thinks that they should do that, please volunteer your time for a month and go and work on a coffee farm just for a month until you understand exactly what's being done. In 15 years of being in this industry, I have picked coffee for probably 2 hours of my life. It was probably the worst 2 hours I've ever done. I think it's not a simple, it's not an easy job. And in a lot of places, things like, and I don't know what the facts are today, but if you look at somewhere like Colombia, coffee is like the 28th or the 30th biggest product that they export. People think that, that everybody in Colombia is just doing coffee all day, all night. It's not. Coffee is just another thing. And if that crop is not delivering you a return, you pull it out and you put a different crop in. And that's what's happening. That's what we're seeing. We're seeing a huge amount of producers who are just not bothered with it. We had some interesting times during the COVID thing. We've been basically dealing with the same people for the whole time we've been in business. Like the producers in Colombia that we deal with, we've been buying from them, I think now for 11 or 12 years. We started out by buying 400 kilos from them, and now we buy, 40 ton from them. So we've grown, they've grown and everything. But, part of the relationship is that we have to make sure that we're telling them what our requirements are so they can plan for us. They're as much reliant on us as we are reliant on them. If we don't order the coffee that or we don't commit to the coffee, they're in trouble. The other thing that a lot of people don't realize is that, I've been at Origin when there's been some of the big coffee buyers come into town, and these are people who are buying for all those places that start with N. And I've sat there thinking I'm just in fact I was with Kim and we sat there going, oh my God, this is embarrassing. We need to buy like 5 ton of coffee and these guys and everything. And I was talking to this young lady who was her first trip to Origin. She was a buyer for them. She'd been working in an office in America for a very long time. She'd cupped a lot of coffees, but she'd never actually seen where they're grown. And I was talking to her about what she's doing. She said, yeah, well, I've got to release 3 new products this year. And I went, okay, that's exciting. And I said, so, how much coffee are you going to buy from here? And she said, I hope 3. And I said, what, containers? And she said, no, 3 million kilos. And I went, what? What do you mean 3 million kilos? She said, well, if you think about this, if I'm going to produce a product that is called whatever it is, coffee, and I'm going to tell a story about it, and I'm going to do a marketing plan, and I'm going to do a branding exercise and everything like that, and we're a global company, the minimum we'll do it for is 50 containers of coffee. That's 1 million kilos. And I've got 3 to do, so I need to buy 3 million kilos. So you can imagine what the farmer's looking at me, who is wanting, 5 tons. He's going, okay, that's great. We can charge these specialty guys a bit more money. But the reality is that he's got 2 million kilos of coffee that he needs to sell, and he's going to sell it all to the person who is going to take it, not necessarily the highest price, because the amount of times that you hear about farmers getting a commitment from somebody and then them reneging on that commitment, and they've got a container of coffee which they paid for and they've got no return on it. It's a bit worrying. So, we're always going to have the big companies that come in and pick up all the coffee that's left there, and they will pay what they feel is the right price for it. Most of the time, that's below production cost. Most of the time. So the big farmers are going, okay, we're locked into this program. We're not going to upset our big clients at all. So they'll do what they need to do, the minimum amount they need to do with that coffee in order to get it for sale. Where we come in and we say, look, we want it super sweet, we want it really clean, we want to do this, and they go, okay, that's fine, but how much are you going to take? And we at Raw, we're going up and down. It's definitely on a downturn at the moment when it comes to volumes of coffee that we're selling. But at the end of the day, the farmers themselves need to earn an income. And if they can't earn an income with coffee, they will remove those crops and put something else in. I'll give you a very good example. We're in Mexico a couple of months ago and talking to a reasonably large farmer for Mexico. I think he was going to produce about 3 ton of cherry. So convert that down, he's producing maybe 500, maybe 600 kilos of parchment. So, he's a big boy in his region. And all he wanted to do was show me his vanilla and how he was growing vanilla on the native trees because they could wrap it around there. And he was so proud, and he was showing me the needle he uses to pollinate his vanilla because there's no pollinators in his region which have a small enough proboscis to actually pollinate vanilla. So he does it by hand with a needle. And I was fascinated by this because I've never experienced it before. But I was talking to him about what he meant, and he said, I'm going to get more money by, he thinks, a factor of 2 times than what he's going to get for all his coffee from his vanilla. And we're talking, maybe 40 vines that are growing around through his coffee plantation. And I said to him, so what does that mean? He said, well, if the grade that I get this year is what it was last year, I'm going to not worry about coffee. I'm just going to plant more vanilla because I can get so much more per kilo for it. And I'm going, well, what are you going to do with the coffee? He said, I just have to make money, which you understand.
And this is the problem. Like for everybody who wrote to me and said, when the series with Heliana came out, for everyone who said it can't be possible, this isn't real. No, the producers, they're just experiencing a downturn. And for people who have said to me over the years, you're catastrophizing this, there's not a real coffee crisis. Folks, it's here. This is it. And through this series, we are going to talk about exactly what it means and what it means from the roaster's perspective, because last week you got to hear it from the producer. You should view this series as part 2 of what the conversation was like with Heliana, because the conversation with Heliana started with Matt here in this building in Raw. So we want to convey to you, because I don't know how to do it any other way, to convey to you the seriousness of what is happening in this industry. The number of people from massive organizations in our industry that contacted me after the series with Eliana and said, there is no coffee crisis, blows my mind. And it makes you wonder, what is the agenda that's going on? Why do people need us to think that there is no crisis? And gaslighting me into thinking that everything that I'm talking about is not correct, when we have these conversations unedited for a reason. We do them with no editing so that you can see that we're not bullshitting about anything. This is a frank conversation that we have with these guests so that you can know this is real. So join us in the next episode, and we're going to really kind of break down what the coffee crisis really is. Thank you, Matt. Peace, love, and peanut butter, everybody. Have an amazing rest of your day.
I really hope you enjoyed this episode, friends. Please don't forget to show us some love by subscribing, liking, commenting, and most of all, sharing this podcast with your friends. Check the show notes for links, including our sponsors and our Patreon, and stay tuned for more great conversations on the Daily Coffee Pro by Mapper Forward.